Broadcasting from Denver, Colorado, this is Democracy Now!
A body of authority stood up for the first time in 4 years and declared that 5 sheriff deputies were guilty of excessive force, leading to the death of Marvin Lewis Booker. All Marvin wanted to do was get his shoes.
Police brutality cases. This week, a federal jury awarded a historic $4.6 million to the family of a homeless preacher. Marvin Booker was in the Denver jail when he was grabbed by a deputy, piled on by a team of officers who handcuffed him, put him in chokehold, and tasered him. He died. Then Colorado's Senate race could determine who controls Congress. Republican candidate Cory Gardner and Democratic incumbent Mark Udall are neck and neck in the polls.
You have voted with Barack Obama 99% of the time, 107 out of 108 times.
It takes real gumption for someone who had the 10th most partisan record in the House of Representatives to continue to make that charge.
We'll look at the Senate race and other key issues in the midterm election, fracking, immigration, and more, with Mike Litwin, veteran Denver Post political columnist who now writes for the Colorado Independent. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting from Denver, Colorado. The World Health Organization says it's focusing efforts on 15 African countries to prevent the spread of the growing Ebola outbreak from Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea. The official toll in those countries surpassed 4,500 this week. Of the 15 at-risk countries, World Health Organization Global Director Isabel Nuttall said Mali and the Ivory Coast are the most vulnerable.
We have identified both Mali and Côte d'Ivoire as the two top priorities country. A team is being assembled to go there and do a real thorough assessment, but more than an assessment, it's moving from an assessment into making sure that things are in place.
Jamaica has become the latest country to impose a travel ban on passengers from Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone. Here in the United States, President Obama continues to oppose a travel ban, but now says he won't rule one out. Obama spoke at the White House Thursday night.
It is currently the judgment of all those who have been involved that a flat-out travel ban is not the best way to go. But we will continue to monitor this. I'm asking these questions, and if, in fact, it turns out that I'm getting different answers, then I will share that with the American people, and we will not hesitate to do what's necessary in order to maximize the chances that we avoid an outbreak here in the United States.
In his comments, President Obama also said he's considering the appointment of an Ebola czar to handle the overall U.S. response. Concern around Ebola has grown nationwide following the infections of 2 Dallas nurses who treated Thomas Eric Duncan, the Liberian national who died last week in Dallas. On Thursday, the chief clinician at the nurses' hospital, Dr. Daniel Varga of Texas Health Presbyterian, apologized to Congress for the mishandling of Duncan's care.
Unfortunately, in our initial treatment of Mr. Duncan, despite our best intentions and a highly skilled medical team, we made mistakes. We did not correctly diagnose his symptoms as those of Ebola, and we are deeply sorry.
On Thursday, the first nurse to be infected at Texas Health Presbyterian, Nina Pham, was flown to Maryland to a National Institutes of Health facility for treatment. The second nurse, Amber Vinson, was transferred Wednesday to Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, leaving no more Ebola patients in Dallas. The U.S.-led coalition is in its third day of heavy strikes on Islamic State fighters around the Syrian town of Kobani. ISIS had been on the verge of seizing Kobani, but the Pentagon claims it slowed the offensive by killing hundreds of fighters. At a briefing in Washington, Pentagon spokesperson General John Kirby said the U.S.-led bombings have used precise targeting.
U.S. forces conducted 14 airstrikes near the town of Kobani yesterday and today. Initial reports that we're getting from Central Command indicate that those strikes successfully hit 19 ISIL buildings, 2 command posts, 3 fighting positions, 3 sniper positions, 1 staging location, and 1 heavy machine gun. Very precise targeting.
According to the Associated Press, Syrian Kurds have asked the U.S. for the direct supply of weapons, saying that the airstrikes are not enough to stop the Islamic State's advance. The Obama administration, meanwhile, says it continues to hold talks with Turkey on hosting U.S.-led forces at Turkish military bases. The White House was forced to walk back an initial claim last week that Turkey had authorized its bases for the coalition's use. The talks come as the State Department has confirmed it's had contact for the first time with the main Kurdish political party in Syria, the Kurdish Democratic Union Party, or PYD. The PYD has close ties to the PKK, the Turkey-based militant Kurdish group that Turkish forces bombed earlier this week. At least 36 people have been killed and more than 100 wounded in a series of bombings in Shia areas around the Iraqi capital of Baghdad. Shiite leaders have blamed the attack on the Islamic State. In Israel and the occupied territories, Israeli forces have shot dead a Palestinian boy in the village of Beit Lakia. The victim, 13-year-old Baha Badr, was reportedly shot after a group of youths threw stones at Israeli forces who'd entered near the Israeli separation wall that carves up the occupied West Bank. Israel says it responded with live fire against a, quote, illegal riot. According to Defense for Children International, Israeli troops and settlers have shot dead at least 10 children in the West Bank this year. That's on top of the more than 500 children killed in Israel's assault on Gaza over the summer. The UN General Assembly has elected Venezuela as among the 5 new non-permanent members of the Security Council for 2015-16. Venezuela's bid drew 181 votes from the 193-member General Assembly. The Bush administration helped defeat Venezuela's last bid for the Security Council in 2006, after then-President Hugo Chavez pledged to be the voice of the South and challenge American dominance. This time, the Obama administration did not say how it voted in the secret ballot. But in a statement, UN Ambassador Samantha Power said, quote, "Unfortunately, Venezuela's conduct at the UN has run counter to the spirit of the UN Charter, and its violations of human rights at home are at odds with the Charter's letter," she said. The Venezuelan government praised its winning bid as a huge triumph over, quote, "a malign campaign against our country," unquote. The Council's other new members are New Zealand, Spain, Angola, and Malaysia. New figures show claims for unemployment benefits have dropped to 264,000, a 14-year low. The official unemployment rate is at 5.9%. The Obama administration's named a new acting head for the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. Vanita Gupta will take up the position after serving as legal director for the American Civil Liberties Union, where she developed a reputation as a champion for human rights. Gupta will be appointed temporarily and formally nominated by the end of the year. She was tapped to replace President Obama's initial choice, Debo Adegbile, who was forced to withdraw earlier this year. The Senate rejected Adegbile following a fight that focused almost solely on his role as part of an NAACP legal defense fund team that successfully argued a trial judge's jury instructions violated the rights of journalist and former Black Panther Mumia Abu-Jamal in his conviction for the killing of a Philadelphia police officer. In a new case of political retribution involving Mumia Abu-Jamal and constitutional rights, Pennsylvania lawmakers have approved a measure that critics say tramples free speech. The measure authorizes censoring the public addresses of prisoners or former offenders should judges agree that allowing them to speak would cause mental anguish to the victim. The measure was approved after Mumia Abu-Jamal delivered a pre-taped commencement address for graduating students at Vermont's Goddard College earlier this month. Abu Jamal's speech was opposed by Pennsylvania state officials, as well as the widow of Daniel Faulkner, the police officer whom Abu Jamal was convicted of killing. Pennsylvania Governor Tom Corbett is expected to sign the measure into law. The American Civil Liberties Union of Pennsylvania has criticized the law, calling it, quote, overbroad and vague and unable to pass constitutional muster under the First Amendment. And the younger son of Vice President Joe Biden has been discharged from the Navy Reserve after testing positive for cocaine. The Navy says it took action earlier this year after Hunter Biden failed a drug test in June of 2013. In a statement, Biden said he has deep regret and embarrassment over his actions and is moving forward with the love and support of his family. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're on the road in Denver, Colorado, broadcasting from the studios of Open Media Foundation, Denver Open Media. Denver has been plagued by a string of police brutality cases. And this week, a federal jury awarded an historic $4.6 million to the family of a homeless preacher who died when sheriff's deputies used excessive force against him. Marvin Booker was a homeless street preacher from a prominent family of Southern preachers. In 2010, he was killed by deputies in the booking room of the Denver jail. Surveillance video of Booker's death shows what happened. A warning to our TV viewers as we show the video now, it contains disturbing content. It shows Marvin Booker being grabbed by an officer, then piled on by a team of officers who then restrain him in handcuffs and put him in a chokehold. After he appears motionless, he's then tasered. Eventually, deputies carry him out of sight of the camera. Booker was pronounced dead hours later in what the coroner ruled a homicide. Prosecutors declined to charge the deputies involved, and Sheriff's Department officials never disciplined them, saying they believed Booker could harm someone and that force was needed to restrain him. On Tuesday, Booker's family and supporters gathered on the steps of Denver's City Jail after a jury awarded the Booker family $4.65 million in compensation and damages. This is Reverend Timothy Tyler, pastor at Shorter Community AME Church in Denver.
Today, in the court of law, a jury stood up. A body of authority stood up for the first time in 4 years and declared that 5 sheriff deputies were guilty of excessive force leading to the death of Marvin Lewis Booker. All Marvin wanted to do was get his shoes.
Marvin Booker's case highlights a history of misconduct by the Denver Sheriff's Department and added momentum to calls for reform. This is the attorney for Marvin Booker's family, Darrell Kilmer, speaking after Tuesday's verdict.
This was not unforeseeable. This was inevitable. This is the way we've allowed our jails to be run, and too many people have been injured and maimed and killed. This case has been watched nationally, as well it should be. This happens in Colorado, in Missouri, in New York. It happens in California. It happens in Texas. It happens in Florida. This is a signal that people are not going to put up with it anymore. Yeah. This is the people that are telling its government, you have to change. This issue has reached a tipping point.
The verdict in Booker's case comes amidst calls for a federal investigation of the Sheriff Department of several cases of abuse. In July, Sheriff Gary Wilson resigned after Denver agreed to pay $3.3 million to settle another federal jail abuse lawsuit by a former prisoner over a beating. It was the largest payout in Denver history to settle a civil rights case until the Booker case, which the city refused to settle. This is Denver Mayor Michael Hancock responding to the verdict in an interview with News 9.
It's a loss of life. It's a tragedy. This family lost a loved one. The whole city's had to deal with this. And, you know, certainly we're disappointed in the verdict and the amount of the verdict. But it doesn't replace the life of Marvin Booker, and we understand that.
Democracy Now! Invited the mayor to join us on the program, but his office didn't respond to our requests. For more, though, we are joined here in Denver by two guests. Reverend Reginald Holmes is pastor of the New Covenant Christian Church, Alpha and Omega Ministries. He's been a leading voice calling for law enforcement accountability in this case and others in Denver. He's past president of the Greater Metro Denver Ministerial Alliance. And we're joined again by Susan Green, editor of the Colorado Independent, longtime reporter and columnist, formerly with the Denver Post. She's followed the case of Marvin Booker extensively, along with numerous other cases of excessive force at the Denver jail. Pastor Holmes, Susan Green, welcome to Democracy Now! Pastor Holmes, let's begin with you. Your response to the $4.6 million settlement that'll go to Marvin Booker's family.
Well, having spoken to the family, I think one of the things that the family wanted to be very clear about is that they're grateful that this ordeal has come to some conclusion, but they did not want and do not want those of us who live here in Denver to believe that somehow the money is a panacea for their pain. And they are very adamant about what they want from this city, and that is they want those officers removed from their positions. They've been very, very clear on that. I think the family, I spoke with Calvin, Marvin's brother, on yesterday, and one of the things that Calvin said is that he wants the community to know that their family forgives the officers. But in forgiving the officers, in no way do they want the officers not to deal with the consequences of their actions.
Mm-hmm. So how many officers were involved?
I believe there was a total of 5 officers that were involved in this case. Amy, the listeners and the viewers rather, have seen the video. This was no high-tech lynching. This was a vigilante lynching. This was a lynching in which it was sanctioned and supported by this city government. And it was sanctioned and supported all the way up until the trial. What was done to this family was unconscionable.
Well, for radio listeners and people all over the world who have perhaps maybe seen this video for the first time, can you explain exactly what happened? Explain the date, and although I laid it out a bit in the lead, talk about what happened to Marvin Booker.
In July of 2010, Marvin was arrested. Marvin was in the booking area getting ready to be processed. He had stayed in the booking area for some hours, and I don't know exactly how many, but it was a while that he had remained in the booking area. When they finally got around to booking Marvin in, Marvin had taken off his shoes. He had become comfortable. They finally got to him. He was called up to the booking desk, which was being manned at the time by a female.
And you see this on the video.
You see this on the video. He goes up to the booking desk. He has a conversation with the booking officer. Finally, she says to Marvin, "It's time for you to go into the cell." Marvin says, "Before I go, I need to go get my shoes." He goes to get his shoes, and as he's going to get his shoes, she says to him, "No, you can't go." She physically touches Marvin on the arm, and Marvin pulls away. And when he pulls away, that created the altercation. Officers came from everywhere. From the video, you can see that they pounced on top of him. Marvin was 135 pounds, 135 pounds with existing medical conditions, a heart condition. He had a 250-pound officer along with others on top of him. The 250-pound officer put Marvin in a carotid chokehold, a chokehold that was held on him for minutes.
When you say carotid, you mean the carotid artery?
The carotid artery. Choked Marvin out. The officers testified in court. They felt threatened. 4 of them on a 135-pound man. They felt threatened, and they were threatened so much that even with the carotid chokehold being applied, someone ordered Marvin to be tased. They actually took the time to go get a taser, to come back and to tase him. His body is limp. He has no movement. He's fought. He's struggled. He's being choked. So it's not that he's resisting.
He's handcuffed.
Yes, and he's doing what anyone would do who's gasping for air. He's trying to get his last breaths. And in trying to get his last breath, the officers determined that he was still struggling. So they get a taser and they tase him. They take him back to the cell and do not even give him the decency of checking up on him. And when it comes to the medical examiners getting there, of course he's dead.
And what did they do then?
Well, from the testimony in court, many of the officers, actually 4 of them went outside, smoked cigarettes, and we are assuming, although they did not admit it, but there was a time for them to corroborate their stories. The medical people came in, took Marvin in, but he was DOA, dead on arrival.
Susan Green of the Colorado Independent, you wrote, Tuesday's verdict put an exclamation point on what civil rights activists and leaders of Metro Denver's African-American community long have said, that Denver killed the wrong man. Explain what you mean.
I mean that on several levels. I mean that in part because of what Pastor Holmes just said. He was a 135-pound man, a frail, homeless man who had a bad heart. So he was not much bigger than me. He posed no threat. His struggle was, as everybody can see on the video, very minimal. And at the time that he was tased, he was motionless, okay? So those facts in and of itself make him the wrong man. Another thing is, there was an assumption by Marvin Booker and a portrayal of him after his death that he was just another homeless guy who was causing trouble in the jail. And what they didn't calculate is that just homeless guy had a rich history in the South, in his hometown in Memphis, where he became really well-known, not just in Memphis, but throughout the South and really the nation, for having memorized Martin Luther King's speeches. His family was close to Martin Luther King. He was 14 when Martin Luther King was shot in his community. Verbatim, he mentioned these speeches, and over time he was able to deliver them with the cadence and tone of King. And he was the guy who would go into churches and go into civil rights events and give the speeches that King wouldn't give, right? He has 2 brothers who have congregations who chose to be pastors. They followed in the footsteps of their father. He chose a different path. He wanted to preach on the street, like he said Jesus did. He wasn't a saint. He had some drug problems. The fact that he was homeless was disturbing to his family. They tried in many ways to help him, and he was really adamant that's the life he wanted to live. So when he died, again, I think, and I was here when he died, and I know what the city's response to it was, and I heard the city's response at trial, which is, this guy had no value. He was a nothing, right? And they sat in 3 weeks in trial and just denigrated him and smeared his relationships with his family.
When did the trial take place?
It took place for 3 weeks, and it ended on Friday, and the verdict was Tuesday.
So it was years later.
4 years. 4 years later. But when I say they picked the wrong man, they didn't know that this man had a community of people in this city, nationally, in the faith community, who were behind him.
I want to read from the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals ruling on the officer's treatment of Marvin Booker. Quote, the defendants had a front row seat to Mr. Booker's rapid deterioration and actively participated in producing Mr. Booker's serious condition through their use of force against him. The court added, quote, given their training, the defendants were in a position to know of a substantial risk to Mr. Booker's health and safety. Because Mr. Booker was handcuffed and on his stomach, we conclude the force was not proportional to the need presented. Reverend Holmes, take it from there.
Yeah, we were quite pleased because those of us in the community who said all along that the officers used excessive force and that they were actually liable for Marvin's death. We were pleased when the 10th Circuit Court of Appeal came and said that the officers were indeed liable for using excessive force. This is a situation that's happening, Amy, here in Denver, but as you well know, it's happening all over this country. Police officers are the only people that we give a free pass when they exercise a lapse in judgment. And I don't think we can continue to do that. We must hold them accountable. Yes, it's a dangerous job, but you know it's a dangerous job when you take the job. We don't give the mechanic a free pass for a lapse in judgment. We don't give the surgeon a free pass when there's a lapse in judgment. But we continue throughout this country, district attorneys continue to give police officers these free passes for their lapse in judgment.
We have to break, but when we come back, I want to ask you, why 4 years? Why did it take 4 years for the settlement to happen? And also about the other cases here in the greater Denver area. We're talking with Reverend Reginald Holmes, pastor of the New Covenant Christian Church, Alpha and Omega Ministries, and we're talking with the editor of the Colorado Independent. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. We'll be back in a minute here in Denver. Poddington Bear here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting from Denver Open Media in Denver, Colorado, where the largest jury verdict in a police brutality case, in any case, has just come down. $4.6 million to the family of Marvin Booker, who was killed in July of 2010 in the booking room of a Denver jail. We're joined by Susan Green, editor of the Colorado Independent, and Reverend Reginald Holmes, who is pastor of the New Covenant Christian Church, Alpha and Omega Ministries, past president of the Greater Metro Denver Ministerial Alliance. So if you can explain this, Reverend Holmes, the largest jury verdict, this wasn't a settlement, there were other larger settlements, $4.6 million. Who were the defendants here?
The defendants in the case was actually the city and county of Denver and the individual officers who perpetrated this crime.
But it's a civil case, so they don't go to jail.
It's a civil case, and they don't go to jail. And again, that is what is grating on the family right now, because even though they've got the financial payment, they're still feeling empty because they're feeling as though these officers were not punished for killing Marvin.
So, Susan Green, these officers were never indicted?
No, in fact, our Denver district attorney, who prosecutes people for crimes that are so much less significant than this, just decided not to prosecute on this at all, which is part of what the Booker family is speaking out on. They're criticizing the Denver DA. They're criticizing a man who is supposed to be the independent monitor of the safety department, whose independence is highly questioned because he never really said anything about this case at all.
And they found the city guilty of, and the officers?
Excessive force, supervisorial negligence, and a very key term here, which is excessive zeal, okay? That these officers used zeal in killing Marvin Booker. I think what's important here is the word zeal, because it's not just the zeal of those officers, it was the zeal of the city in pursuing this in court and not settling it and not even speaking to the family, but deciding for 4 years to defend what was not defendable. I mean, if your viewers saw that video, and for the people listening to this on radio, that is a black and white video of sheriff's deputies killing a man. And so what they did is they decided to go this course, this 4-year-long course, in which they prevaricated, in which they withheld evidence, in which several paid witnesses who worked for the city or who were paid $750 an hour to testify for the city lied in defense of this murder.
The roles of, was it Governor Hickenlooper who was mayor at the time?
Exactly. He was mayor, and he did what any decent human being and politician would do, which is he met with the family, he expressed his remorse and grief over this killing. He didn't express guilt or culpability on the part of the police, because obviously it was in litigation, but he interfaced with them, right? He acknowledged that a man was killed in our jail and that deserved some recognition, right? Michael Hancock was running for mayor at that point. At some point when the Denver...
He's the second black mayor of Denver?
He is. He's the second black mayor of Denver. Hickenlooper is white. He's our governor. He's running for re-election now. When Hancock was running and the DA decided not to prosecute, during Hancock's campaign, and Hancock comes out of the black community, comes out of a community, a faith community that it was tied to Marvin Booker, said he was perfectly satisfied with this investigation. And what's interesting is if you sat through that trial, as Pastor Holmes did almost every day, and several people did almost every day, and you watched the details and the holes in that investigation, it's really hard to see how you could have been satisfied with it.
Pastor Holmes, your response to how the city dealt with this, how Mayor Hancock dealt with this?
Well, we're all disappointed. We're very disappointed because we have supported Michael, not just as mayor, but Michael came up through the ranks. He was a city council person, made promises to us because, in all fairness to him, many of these problems existed before he got there. But in coming into the office, he made some serious pledges that things would be different. And we're extremely disappointed because we don't see that difference. We see things, in fact, getting worse. And I think it's disingenuous of our community when we would hold white politicians accountable, but would somehow give black politicians a free ride, in that we don't speak out, we don't say anything, that somehow it becomes okay for things to continue as usual because the politician is black.
And so this is all happening. The jury was weighing this. The trial was going on in the midst of what happened in Missouri. Darren Wilson has not been indicted yet. There is a grand jury. Your thoughts as you were dealing with both of these cases?
Well, my thoughts...
For the killing of 18-year-old unarmed teenager.
Right, in Ferguson. Yeah, my thoughts were that, you know, this is happening at an alarming rate all over this nation. And I think that it's great that you all are here in Denver, because I think sometimes Denver gets this pristine view from the rest of the world, that it's the Mile High City with snow-capped mountains. But this is a very corrupt administration. This is a very corrupt law enforcement. If you knew what they did in this trial, you would be appalled. From losing the taser, which would have given the community and would have given the court some idea of how long that taser was applied.
The taser that you see on the video.
The taser that was used to kill Marvin. I worked extensively under Hickenlooper's administration. I was a part of the campaign to build this new state-of-the-art detention facility. They get into court and tell us that this brand new, it was brand new in 2010, only months old, this brand new state-of-the-art facility, they came in court when it was discovered that some of the videos in Nixonian fashion, some of the videos had been darkened, that somehow they just gave out. We knew the videos were a problem, but we just never got around to fixing them. Now, who does that? That's the equivalence of you saying to me, you go buy a new car and you drive it off the lot and the headlights don't work. But you don't take it back and say, gosh, I need to get my headlights fixed because I can't really drive in the dark. So what happens is that they want to convince us that they got this new state-of-the-art facility and the video cameras didn't work, and they were perfectly okay with the cameras not working. And they used that, you know, conveniently to be able to say, because those videos would have shown without a shadow of a doubt more clarity to the brutality that happened to Marvin.
And the taser's missing.
The taser's missing. The cameras don't work in this brand new multi-million-dollar facility, and no one makes a report. No one tells their superiors from the sheriff's department exactly what's going on with the cameras, with the tasers. The reports are incomplete. The sheriffs do not even investigate the incident from within. They turn it over to the Denver Police Department, and we're just not very clear on how all that went down.
The chief of police, Robert White, is black?
Yes.
White is black.
That's right. The sheriff's black, the mayor's black, manager of safety is black.
What happened to the sheriff here?
The sheriff was, supposedly, it was a mutual agreement between the sheriff and the mayor that he stepped down.
I want to get to a few other cases very quickly, because then we want to talk about what's happening here in the state vis-a-vis national politics, though this certainly plays into national politics, the issue of police brutality major around the country. Another video the Colorado Independent obtained shows officers in the Denver jail's infirmary using excessive force against prisoner Isaiah Moreno in 2013. After he was placed in solitary confinement for exhibiting suicidal behavior, footage shows Moreno pacing his cell, banging his head against the wall. So a team of 8 officers then enter the cell. 2 officers hold taser guns pointed at him, even though he's sitting down and does not appear to threaten them. When they fire the tasers, he slumps to the floor. They then strap him into a restraint chair and leave him alone in the cell. An investigation by Denver's Internal Affairs Bureau found the sergeant in charge violated use of force policies when he ordered the 2 deputies to taser Moreno. The report reads in part, quote, simply stated, there was no need to use the taser to gain compliance. And what happened next in that case? Susan Green.
Well, he sat there. They left. This is a cell for a suicidal man, right? They put him in what's essentially a straitjacket and a wheelchair, and they just left him there. That's what happened. And they then come out and say he presented a threat. He was in a room, a single cell room, with almost no clothes on. He had no way of hurting anybody, and they felt the need to taser him. I mean, this happened in a courtroom just months earlier, where a man was handcuffed, fully shackled at his feet, testifying before a judge. And out of the blue, and we had a video of this, a sheriff's deputy just slams him into a wall.
In the courtroom?
In the courtroom.
In front of the judge?
In front of the judge. And get this is really what I think is relevant in that case and in the Booker case, is their explanation for it was he was tripping and we were just helping him up.
Let me ask you about another case, this that you've been reporting on. It's the case of excessive use of force by the Denver Sheriff's Department. And this is a clip from a video in 2012, a prisoner, Anthony Waller, in Judge Doris Bird's courtroom. After the judge reads a list of charges to Waller, a sheriff's deputy slams him into a wall when he responds.
The investigation for false imprisonment, assault in the third degree, assault as a Class 2 felony, and a misdemeanor charge as well in possession of drug paraphernalia. Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to object first. If I'm under investigation, I thought the investigation came first, then the rest came.
Right, but they have 3 days.
Get on your feet. You don't turn on me. Boy, this is what you do. SWAT team. Get on your feet. Get on your feet.
Can you explain what this video is all about, what happened to Anthony Waller?
Yeah, the sheriff just flipped out at him with no provocation.
In the courtroom? In the courtroom,
in front of a judge. Well, the judge essentially did say nothing, okay? And other sheriff's deputies sat by and did nothing. Again, he was fully shackled, hands shackled, feet shackled, hands shackled behind his waist, and he was slammed into a wall. And the explanation, again, was that he tripped and they were trying to help him up.
And without the diligence of the Colorado Independent uncovering these videos, the tragedy is that the community would have never known that these kinds of things were going on. And it's out of control here in Denver. It's out of control here, and we don't want people to get the wrong impression of our city. It's a great place to live, but we've got some serious issues with law enforcement, and I think it starts with our district attorney, it starts with the mayor, it starts with this entire administration, because these things happen. They hide them, they don't comment, they don't say anything about it, and it has to stop. It has to stop.
Well, we're going to leave it there, but we certainly won't continue to investigate. We will not stop continuing to investigate and follow your investigations. I'll end again with that first sentence and summarizing from Susan Green's piece on what happened this week. A federal jury delivering what may be the costliest verdict yet in a Denver excessive force case. The $4.6 million jury award to Marvin Booker's family came after jurors found 5 Denver sheriff's deputies excessively restrained and subdued a homeless street preacher, Marvin Booker, failed to try to save his life and acted with, quote, evil motive or intent when he died in July 2010 on the floor of the city jail booking room. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. We are broadcasting from Denver, Colorado. Our guests have been Pastor Reginald Holmes of the New Covenant Christian Church Alpha and Omega Ministries, past president of the Greater Metro Denver Ministerial Alliance, and Susan Green, editor of the Colorado Independent. When we come back, this state can determine the state of the Congress in November. We'll speak with a veteran political reporter about the gubernatorial race, the Senate race, House races, and other issues. Stay with us.
Be your best friend, help every way you can. Man, take his feature, just run the way. Careful how you vote on election day.
Be careful how you vote. Sunnyland Slim here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We are broadcasting once again from the studios of Open Media Foundation, Denver Open Media, here in Denver, Colorado, where a key Senate race has become one of the nation's most closely watched contests. Republican candidate Cory Gardner and Democratic incumbent Mark Udall are neck and neck in the polls. The political battle has the potential to tip control of the Senate to the Republicans. Gardner's a two-term congressman, son of a tractor salesman, who's attacked Udall's support of Affordable Care Act and close family political ties. Meanwhile, Senator Udall has accused Gardner of being too far to the right, especially in his previous support for Colorado's so-called personhood ballot measures, which declare that rights begin at conception.
It comes down to respect for women and our lives. So Congressman Cory Gardner's history promoting harsh anti-abortion laws is disturbing. Gardner sponsored a bill to make abortion a felony, including cases of rape and incest. Gardner even championed an 8-year crusade to outlaw birth control here in Colorado. But Mark Udall protects our right to choose, our access to birth control.
Endorsed by Senator Udall, but may have backfired. Last week, to the surprise of many, Cory Gardner won the endorsement of the state's biggest newspaper, the Denver Post. The paper had previously endorsed Udall in his 2008 run for Senate, but shifted allegiances, saying he's now running a, quote, obnoxious one-issue campaign on abortion issues. Senator Udall, the incumbent, responded by telling Reuters, quote, if Congressman Gardner hadn't built his entire political career on limiting women's reproductive choices, we wouldn't be having this discussion today. The closely contested Senate race is widely viewed as a litmus test for whether Colorado has shifted into the Democrat column or remains a swing state. President Obama carried Colorado in his 2 runs for the White House, and Republicans have not won a top-of-the-ticket race here in a decade. However, Democrats are now so concerned about Senator Udall's chances that President Obama has urged Colorado voters to consider the race as important as the 2008 presidential ballot. And on Monday, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton headlined a fundraiser for Udall in Denver and posed with him afterwards for a photo shoot. Meanwhile, Colorado voters have been bombarded by political ads from both sides as outside groups have poured millions of dollars into the campaigns. According to the New York Times, Cory Gardner raised $4.5 million and reported $1.4 million more in cash on hand than Udall. The governor's race between the incumbent, Democrat John Hickenlooper, and former Republican Congressman Bob Beaupre is also far tighter than many had anticipated. Well, for more, we're joined now by Mike Litwin, veteran Denver Post political columnist who now writes for the Colorado Independent and elsewhere. Mike Litwin, welcome to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us.
Thank you.
So let's talk about the significance of the Gardner-Udall contest, the race for the Senate that could determine who controls the Senate starting next year.
Well, Colorado, sadly for us who live here, has become one of the key bellwether states, and not sadly to live here. It's a great place to live, but it's not a great place if you watch TV, because every single minute of advertising time in Denver, Colorado is sold out. We have the sad onus of being the most thoroughly political advertised city in America. So all you suffering out there, it's worse here. And the reason for this is that Colorado is a state that doesn't easily fit into any one category, and has become sort of a purple state because our state is divided almost equally among Republicans, Democrats, and unaffiliated. So every race seems to be a toss-up. Every race seems to be 2 or 3 point difference, and the Democrats have had that 2 or 3 point advantage for 10 years now, but it's still usually a 2 or 3 point advantage.
So talk about the Gardner-Udall.
The Gardner-Udall race, to me, it's been kind of a depressing race because they have avoided so many of what I think are the important issues. You don't hear very much about immigration. You don't hear very much about minimum wage. You don't hear very much about paycheck equity. You don't hear a lot about what's going on in Syria. Most of the races, as you were saying, is about Cory Gardner's previous support of personhood, which he used to brag about supporting and passed out petitions in church, and he is now supporting what was a national personhood bill.
Let's talk about this personhood initiative on the November ballot, which would amend the state constitution to define every stage of pregnancy as a legal human being.
Right.
Critics argue it would ban not only abortion, but also common forms of birth control and in vitro fertilization. The Republican Senate candidate, Cory Gardner, has come out against the measure, as you said, after supporting 2 previous attempts to pass a personhood initiative in 2008 and 2010 here in Colorado. Last month, a reporter asked him why he still supports a personhood bill at the federal level.
If you don't support the personhood initiative at the state level anymore, why keep your name on that Life Begins at Conception Act at the federal level?
There is no such thing as a federal personhood bill.
Okay, but Cory, I mean, the people who wrote that bill, Congressman Duncan Hunter of California, Paul Brown of Georgia, they say, Personhood USA says that that is what the Life Begins at Conception
When I
Act
announced
is.
for the Senate, that's when this outcry started from the Senate campaign of Senator Udall's. That's what they're trying to do. This is all politics. It's unfortunate that they can't focus on
facts are,
anything.
I mean, just
no, the facts are, Eli, that there is no federal personhood bill. There is no federal personhood bill.
That was the Republican senatorial candidate, Cory Gardner, being questioned. Mike Litwin.
Yeah, this is the what you see before your eyes is not what happened. Who do you believe, me or your lying eyes? Defense. Cory Gardner says there is no federal personhood bill. There is no federal personhood bill. There is no federal personhood bill. When, of course, there is a federal personhood bill. He's the co-sponsor. As you heard Duncan Hunter say, this is a way to get around Roe v. Wade. They think this would overturn Roe v. Wade, according to supporters. Personhood USA says it's a personhood bill. And Cory Gardner says, he says 2 things. 1, it's not a personhood bill. 2, this is just a statement of my belief, that the bill is just a statement of his belief that he's pro-life. And so this has allowed Mark Udall to continue on this path because not only have we got, yes, we understand that Cory Gardner once supported personhood and now he doesn't on the state amendment, but why in the world is he still supporting it in Congress? And that's the question. Why in the world is he still supporting it in Congress?
What about the money that's pouring into these campaigns, the outside money? Can you talk about Carl?
Yeah, you mentioned $4.5 million that Cory Gardner raised. That's nothing. That's bupkis. All the money is outside money, and it is pouring in from left and right. And that's why you see every available second of TV ad time is sold out. The campaigns themselves, the Udall and Gardner campaign, they can't spend all of their money. They don't know how to spend it. They don't have enough, there's not enough room to spend it. So they're taking their money, and this will be fascinating. They're taking their money and spending it on the ground game. They're spending 3 or 4 times as much on ground game as anyone ever spent. Get out, ground game meaning get out the vote. And for the Democrats, this is what the Democrat hope is. Cory Gardner is running about 3 points ahead of Mark Udall. The Democrats believe that their get out the vote thing is about a 3-point difference. So if they have if Gardner's 3 points ahead in the polls and Democrats think they're 3 points ahead, that's a tie.
Senator Udall is a big oil and gas guy, but he's also, along with Senator Wyden of Oregon, a major figure speaking out around the issue of surveillance in this country.
Yes. Udall is old-time Colorado environmentalist, has climbed all of the 14ers in the state of,
the tallest 14 mountains.
The 14,000 feet mountains. He's gone, I think there's 50-something of them. He's gone around the world and climbed. He's the rugged outdoor guy. He got his years, he's got his start in Outward Bound. He looks like Colorado. Cory Gardner, he's from the Eastern Plains farming area, but he looks like he's, I don't know, a dentist from Connecticut. So he doesn't have that same sort of rugged Colorado look that Udall has. And a lot of So Gardner just did a commercial about showing himself in the mountains, and the Denver Post made fun of him as, you know, he's no Mark Udall.
I want to go to the climate change issue.
Yeah.
During a debate earlier this month, the moderator asked Cory Gardner to answer a question on climate change with a simple yes or no response. Let's go to that exchange.
Do you believe humans are contributing significantly to climate change?
Well, I've said all along climate change is an important issue, and I don't think you can say yes or no.
You've got 60 seconds after.
Oh, then the governor's
I
race
believe the climate is changing. I disagree to the extent that there's been a movement.
Okay, there you have it. Cory Gardner not wanting to answer yes or no to this question on climate change.
That's their whole strategy is to vote right, appear moderate. And Cory Gardner is a very moderate-looking person, and that's their real hope is to capture the Senate in Colorado by appearing to be more moderate than the vote indicates.
The governor's race, John Hickenlooper versus Bob Beaupre.
This is more of an old-fashioned race about the issues, about Colorado, and John Hickenlooper is touting the economy, which is finally pretty good in Colorado and has grown in Hickenlooper's career. And on the other side, the two big issues for Beaupre have been that after Sandy Hook and Aurora, that the Democratic legislature passed some very modest gun laws, which led, as you may have heard, to the recall of 2 state senators, and has been a huge issue in Colorado ever since. And then in the death penalty, where Hickenlooper ran as a pro-death penalty governor in 2010, but when it came to time to execute the first person in Colorado in 20 years, he couldn't do it. He backed off and said this wasn't what government should do, and had a real epiphanous moment. But for Republicans have said it was a flip-flop, and Beaupre has said that if he is elected governor, that the first thing, or one of the first things he'll do is to execute Nathan Dunlap.
The congressional race that is getting a lot of attention.
Yeah, the race, the 6th district race between Andrew Romanoff and the incumbent Mike Kaufman started out being a huge race, and because it's a very close district, one of the few ungerrymandered districts in America, it really is one of those third districts. But since the House became less important, nobody thinks the House is going to swing one way or the other, stuck as Republican House, that people became less interested in having a lot of trouble.
What Kaufman's known for, what Romanoff's known for.
Yeah. Romanoff is used to be Speaker of the House in Colorado, and he's sort of a mainstream liberal. And Kaufman is a former Marine who is a conservative Republican who is very big on cutting money on the Defense Department, though.
We have to leave it there. We want to thank you very much for being with us. Mike Litwin with the Colorado Independent, former veteran reporter with the Denver Post. And that does it for our show. Happy birthday to Jamie Hill. Special thanks today to Dennis Moynihan. Democracy Now! Is produced by Mike Burke, Renee Feltz, Nermeen Sheikh, Dina Guzder, and special thanks to Denver Open Media, Tony Shawcross, and Ann Tyson, all the folks here that made this broadcast possible. I'm Amy Goodman. Our website is democracynow.org. Thanks so much for joining us.